At 2:13 a.m., Chloe Park stood under the ambulance bay overhang with sleet striking the concrete in thin, hard lines, and she pressed 2 fingers above her right eyebrow where the migraine had been pulsing since midnight, as if pressure could bargain with pain. The automatic doors opened behind her and released a wash of hospital heat, bleach, and stale coffee. Then sealed again, shutting her back into wet cold and the metallic hiss of tires on the street. 14 hours of interpretation had left her voice raw, her lower back knotted, and her stomach so empty it felt folded in on itself. Her phone showed 9% battery, 3 missed calls from an unknown number, and a reminder she had snoozed twice already. Rent auto draft, 8 a.m. She sat on a concrete planter by the curb and opened her banking app with hands that trembled more from fatigue than weather. $43.17. She stared at the numbers until they blurred, blinked hard, then looked again as if a second reading could alter arithmetic. It didn't. Her checking account had become a waiting room where bad news took a ticket and sat down in order. Rent, electric, minimum on the card she had used for her mother's emergency surgery. Then the collection letter from imaging she had been pretending not to see. She swallowed against nausea, closed the app, and pulled up her rideshare driver dashboard instead, hoping for one airport run before dawn. No demand surge, no requests. The city looked washed out and indifferent under the weather radar. Blue-green bands of freezing rain moving east like a slow bruise. A charge nurse pushed through the bay doors, balancing 2 paper cups. "You're still here?" he asked, tired enough not to hide surprise. "Trying to get home," Chloe said. He passed her one of the cups. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but she wrapped both hands around it anyway. "You did good with that family in 3 South," he said. "The grandmother trusted you. She wouldn't sign until you explained every line." Chloe nodded once. Compliments at 2:13 a.m. had a strange weight. They felt generous and useless at the same time. "Thanks. Get some sleep." She almost laughed. Sleep had become something she scheduled in hopeful fragments, like break room lunches that never happened. "I will." He gave her a look that said he knew she wouldn't, and walked back inside. By 2:21, the sleet thickened and started clinging to her thrift store wool coat, darkening the shoulders and seeping through the seams near her elbows. She checked her inbox while she waited for a ride ping that never came. And the newest message sat at the top with the urgency flag red. Private language support needed immediately. Bella Rosa Hotel. Formal negotiation setting. Italian and Albanian required. Premium overnight rate. The coordinator had added one line below the payment terms, as if trying to soften coercion with courtesy. Client requested a discreet professional with medical and legal terminology experience. Discreet professional. She closed her eyes for a full breath. The Bella Rosa paid same-night by wire if the client approved hours on site, and same-night money meant rent might not bounce before sunrise. Her pride objected first and loudly. Last-minute private bookings in elite hotels came with too many variables and no union backing, and she had promised herself after the last humiliating gala assignment that she would stick to hospital and court contracts no matter how tight things got. Then her pride sat down in the corner and stared at the $43. She tapped accept. The dispatcher called within 30 seconds, all clipped efficiency and false cheer. "Ms. Park, thank you for taking this. Car is 8 minutes out. Black sedan, plate ending 27. Dress code is conservative business. Bring your own credentialing." "I'm in hospital scrubs under a coat," Chloe said. "I can keep the coat buttoned." Client requested immediate arrival. That's acceptable. Please remember, translation staff do not initiate direct conversation with principals unless addressed. Chloe looked up into sleet that felt sharper now. I know the protocol. Excellent. We appreciate your flexibility. The call ended before she could answer that flexibility wasn't a personality trait anymore. It was a bill-paying reflex. She went to the staff restroom on the first floor, locked herself in a stall, and changed in the cramped space from scrub top to the plain black blouse she kept folded in her tote for court overflow days. The fabric smelled faintly of detergent and hospital corridor. She rinsed her face with cold water, pressed concealer beneath her eyes, and twisted her hair into a low knot with a cracked elastic band. When she leaned toward the mirror, fluorescent light carved shadows under her cheekbones and revealed a small burst blood vessel near her right eye from the migraine strain. She turned slightly, hoping different angles could disguise exhaustion. They couldn't. Keys, badge, phone, portable charger that no longer held a full charge. She checked each item by touch before she left. Old survival habit disguised as professional discipline. The sedan arrived at 2:37. The driver did not speak beyond confirming her name and destination. Heat blasted through the vents, thawing her fingers until they prickled painfully. Outside, the city moved in wet reflections. Shuttered storefronts, traffic lights changing for empty intersections, liquor signs blinking over sidewalks where no one walked. Chloe pressed her forehead to the cool window and watched neighborhoods shift from laundromats and payday loan signs to curated plantings, private security booths, and limestone facades with discreet brass plaques. Wealth didn't sleep here. It glowed. Even the storm looked better funded, sleet turning to a delicate shimmer under architected lighting instead of slush and gray runoff. At 2:49, her mother texted from a different time zone where dawn arrived first. Are you off shift? Eat something warm. I sent what I could this week. The amount was $18. Chloe stared at the message, throat tightening. Her mother still believed she was choosing extra shifts for career momentum, not because medical debt had transformed each month into a controlled emergency. Chloe typed back, got off late. I'm okay. Sleep now. Love you. She deleted the first draft. Need more time before rent. Before sending the second. There were forms of honesty that functioned as cruelty when offered to someone already carrying enough. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a number she recognized and had been dodging for 12 days. Collections Department. She let it ring to voicemail. Then again, voicemail. On the third call, she answered, because silence had started to feel like standing in front of a wave, pretending water respected denial. Ms. Park, this is Marisol from Patient Accounts. I'm calling regarding your outstanding balance of... I know the balance, Chloe said, keeping her voice low so the driver wouldn't hear. We can prevent escalation if we receive a partial payment tonight. Tonight? Before system close at 4. Chloe watched sleet stripe the glass. I can do 100 by morning. We need confirmation now. I said by morning. A pause, keyboard clicks. I can note intent to pay. Please understand this does not pause reporting. I understand. When the call ended, her pulse kept climbing anyway. Intent to pay. Intent to sleep. Intent to keep a life from collapsing through administrative cracks. She leaned back and closed her eyes. But numbers continued scrolling behind her lids. By the time the sedan curved onto Bella Rosa Avenue, it was 3:02, and the storm had turned the street into a mirrored ribbon of stone and light. The hotel rose from the block like an argument made of marble and gold leaf, its entrance framed by columns that looked older than the city and warmer than any place Chloe had lived in years. A doorman in a tailored coat opened her door before she touched the handle. His umbrella moved over her with practiced precision, sheltering her from the sleet while her shoes stepped from puddled curb to spotless carpet runner as if weather had boundaries here and obeyed them. Inside, the air held polished cedar, expensive perfume, and the low hum of money being spent quietly. Crystal sconces fractured the light into clean geometric patterns across the stone floor. Chloe paused just past the revolving doors, and cold water from her coat hem gathered in a small dark crescent on the marble. She took her credential from her bag and approached the front desk, where a man in a midnight suit looked over her shoulder before he looked at her face. "Name," he said. "Chloe Park. I'm here for the private language booking." His gaze dropped to her coat cuff, where the seam had frayed and come loose. "Translation staff," he said into his earpiece without eye contact, then returned to the screen. "You'll be escorted." Not Ms. Park, not interpreter. Translation staff, flat as inventory. Humiliation arrived as heat first, then cold. Chloe signed the confidentiality register with fingers still numb from the ride, accepted a temporary access card, and followed a young assistant toward a private elevator bank roped off from the main lobby. As they crossed the atrium, she passed a glass case displaying vintage watches under security lights, each piece worth more than her annual salary, then caught her own reflection in the case. Coat damp, posture rigid, expression composed by force. She looked like someone pretending to belong until morning. The assistant stopped at bronze elevator doors, engraved with a crest she didn't recognize. "Protocol reminder," he said, keeping his tone neutral but not unkind. "Speak only when requested. No recording devices unless cleared. No direct messaging from inside. If a principal asks for a repeat, give exact language. No smoothing. Exact language." The phrase landed heavier than it should have. "I understand," Chloe said. The elevator climbed in near silence, floor numbers ticking upward in soft amber light, while her migraine sharpened into a hot line behind her eye. She counted breaths to keep her hands steady. 4 in, 4 out. At floor 38, the doors opened to a corridor lined in dark walnut and muted carpet that swallowed footfalls. 2 security men stood outside double doors with earpieces and matching watches. One checked her credential, then her bag, then nodded to the other. When the doors opened, a wave of warmer air and low male voices rolled toward her, along with the scent of old leather and espresso. Chloe straightened her shoulders, tucked one wet strand of hair behind her ear, and stepped over the threshold, telling herself she would endure this one assignment, collect the wire, and sleep in her car if she had to. The doors sealed behind her with a soft hydraulic hush that sounded to Chloe like a vault closing. A private dining salon unfolded in dark wood and amber light, all restraint and expense. A 10-seat table of black lacquer, crystal water glasses aligned to the millimeter, silver warmed by candlelight that never flickered because the air system was tuned too perfectly for drafts. Men in tailored suits occupied most of the chairs, their watches catching light in sharp, deliberate glints each time a wrist moved. No one raised a voice. No one reached for a phone. Authority sat in posture here, in who remained seated when someone entered and who stood without being asked. A maitre d' in white gloves crossed toward her with a tablet tucked against his chest. He glanced at her credential badge, then at the damp hem of her coat, and gave the kind of polite smile that excluded her from the room before she spoke. "Translation staff has arrived," he announced, not to her but to the nearest man at the table, and he angled his body so she had to step around him to avoid brushing his sleeve. "You will remain on the secondary line, unless directly addressed. Water station is there. Do not interrupt principal dialogue." Chloe felt heat climb into her face, despite the cold still trapped in her coat. I was contracted for live consecutive interpretation, she said, careful, professional, keeping her voice neutral. If both parties are using non-overlapping dialects, secondary line will slow accuracy. The maitre d' looked at her as if she had spoken out of turn in a language he refused to learn. You will follow house protocol. Before she could answer, a chair at the far end moved back by an inch. The motion was small, but every conversation in the room thinned. The man at the head of the table lifted his gaze from a folder and settled it on her with unhurried precision. Matteo Valieri wore a black suit that looked cut into place rather than put on. White shirt, no tie, a matte watch with a face so plain it telegraphed cost better than diamonds ever could. He didn't perform charisma, he measured. Dark eyes, still expression, controlled breathing. When he spoke, the room leaned toward the sound. Ms. Park, he said, you came highly recommended. The words were formal, almost courteous, and still landed like an equipment check. She had spent years being reduced to function in hospitals and courtrooms. But this room managed a sharper version, because everyone here treated language as leverage rather than care. Thank you, Mr. Valieri, she said. I'll need direct sightlines to both speakers. He held her gaze for a second longer, assessing whether the request was competence or defiance, then tipped his head once toward an open chair at his right, one position behind the principal line. Sit there. You translate exactly what is said. The maitre d' stiffened, as if corrected in private and public at once. Chloe moved to the chair, set her tote by her ankle, and slid her phone into airplane mode before placing it face down beside her notepad. Her hands had started to shake again, so she pressed her palm against her thigh until the tremor eased. From this angle she could see the whole table and the mirrored wall beyond it, where staff passed in blurred reflections, carrying espresso, mineral water, untouched plates of citrus and almonds. Her stomach cramped at the smell of coffee. Introductions began with the clipped rhythm of men used to contracts larger than governments admitted existed. Names came in Italian first, then Albanian, each paired with titles that revealed hierarchy without stating it. Logistics Director, Customs Liaison, Shipping Counsel, External Advisor. Chloe rendered each line into the other language with practiced cadence, keeping register precise, preserving legal hedges and implied threats alike. She was good at this. She knew where to pause, where to mirror tone without imitating personality, where ambiguity was intentional and where it was a trap. Social rank expressed itself in little cuts. A lieutenant asked for clarification and looked past her at Matteo while she answered. One of the Albanian delegates switched into a regional variant mid-sentence, then smirked when she translated cleanly anyway. A younger Italian aide addressed her as ragazza, girl, while asking for the water pitcher. She passed it without comment, because rent drafted in less than 5 hours and Dignity did not pay overdraft fees. 10 minutes in, Matteo asked for a revision to a shipping clause, and everyone stopped performing dominance long enough to write. Chloe noticed how he listened. Eyes on documents, attention on voices, never speaking over anyone, never repeating himself. Control without noise. When disagreement rose between two men halfway down the table, he silenced it by laying a pen flat on the lacquered surface. The click was quiet. It worked better than shouting. She kept translating, itemized storage, customs inspections. Port schedules pushed because of weather over the northern routes. Everything sounded legitimate, and the room worked very hard to make legitimacy look effortless. Even so, signals surfaced at the edges. The first came through the service door near the bar. A valet in hotel livery stepped in with a tray, saw who was seated at the head, and halted for a fraction too long. The tray trembled once, glasses chiming against each other in a bright, accidental note that drew 3 eyes at once. He recovered, set the drinks down, and backed out faster than protocol allowed, avoiding the side of the table where the Albanian contingent sat. Chloe marked it in her notepad without meaning to. A tiny diagonal line beside the current agenda item. The second signal was a courier posted at the main entrance, a broad-shouldered man with an earpiece and a rain-dark coat. He stood just outside the threshold with a sealed document tube in hand, waiting for permission to enter. From across the room, she could see his right thumb rubbing the seam of the tube over and over, fast enough to abrade skin. Nerves were common in rooms like this. Fear that specific wasn't. She translated an exchange about bonded warehouse insurance while tracking the room's peripheral movement the way she did in emergency departments, scanning for the one variable that didn't match the chart. The Albanian external advisor, Victor Sava, sat 2 seats opposite her in a charcoal suit with a pale blue tie and a smile that never reached his eyes. He spoke excellent Italian, chose not to use it unless it advantaged him, and kept returning to Albanian when points turned consequential, forcing the table through Chloe as a bottleneck. Each time he addressed Matteo, he used honorifics wrapped in warmth. Each time he looked at Chloe, the warmth vanished so quickly it felt rehearsed. "Please render this with precision," Victor said at one point, fingers steepled, voice smooth as polished wood. "I would hate for nuance to be lost." "I always preserve nuance," Chloe replied in Italian, then translated his line into Albanian for parody. She kept her chin level. Her throat had started to feel too tight around her pulse. Across from her, Matteo's gaze flicked up from the contract packet to her face, then to Victor, then back to the page. No expression changed. The movement registered as data collection and nothing more. By 3:19 a.m., sleet had hardened into freezing rain against the tall windows, the impacts ticking faintly through insulated glass. The meeting moved into annex terms, where courtesies thinned and stakes sharpened. Chloe noticed that Victor stopped touching his pen and started touching his cufflink, rotating it in exact quarter turns whenever someone mentioned witness statements or municipal review. A tell, maybe, or a habit tied to pressure points in the agenda. She wrote another small mark on the margin. The courier was finally waved inside. He crossed the room with careful steps, offered the tube to Victor, and kept his head down. When Victor accepted it, the courier murmured 2 words in a low Albanian dialect from the northeast borderlands, old-fashioned and compressed. Chloe caught only one clearly. "Tonight." Victor answered without looking at him, equally low. The courier's shoulders locked for a second before he retreated to the wall. A minute later, Matteo requested oral confirmation of revised language, one principle at a time, both languages on record. The structure was routine. The timing wasn't. Chloe sensed the shift in how men sat, how jackets opened, how the security chief near the bar changed stance to place one hand closer to his inside pocket without making it obvious. Protocol tightening under polite surfaces. When it was Victor's turn, he leaned back and smiled as if indulging theater. "Of course," he said in Italian, then switched to Albanian and continued in a softer register meant for intimate conversations, not boardroom declarations. Chloe translated the first sentence easily. Transport windows, insurance fallback, discretion. He paused, watching her rather than Matteo, and added a second sentence in dialect denser than before, consonants clipped, vowels flattened by mountain cadence. The words slid under her skin like ice water. He was not discussing freight. He was discussing a witness. A teenage witness. He described the girl's school route, the color of her backpack, the crosswalk she used when rain made traffic lights glitch. And he framed the threat as a courtesy to avoid future misunderstandings. No raised voice, no profanity, just a timetable for terror delivered with dinner party manners. For half a heartbeat, Chloe's mind split into professional reflex and human refusal. Exact language, the house protocol had said. Translate exactly what is said. Her mouth went dry. Her pulse slammed so hard she felt it behind her eye where the migraine burned. Around the table, pens waited. Faces watched. The room expected her to become a weapon, because that was what interpreters became when powerful men outsourced violence into grammar. Victor tilted his head, still smiling. Translate, he said in Italian this time, almost kindly. Word for word. The courier by the wall looked at the floor. The valet did not come back through the service door. Rain hit the windows in a harder burst, a sudden rattling hiss that seemed to erase every softer sound in the room. Chloe lifted her gaze toward Matteo and found him already watching her, unreadable, absolutely still, while the silence stretched tight enough to cut. Chloe held Matteo's gaze for one suspended second, and in that second, she understood the crux with brutal clarity. If she translated Victor's sentence exactly, language would become a delivery mechanism for harm. If she refused outright, she might not leave the room standing. Her tongue felt thick, her throat narrowed, and the migraine behind her right eye flashed hot enough to blur the candlelight into doubled halos. Victor's smile widened by a fraction. Translate, he repeated, this time in Albanian, then in Italian. Patient as a tutor correcting a slow student. Word for word. At 3:20 a.m., the clock built into the walnut sideboard clicked to the next minute, quiet but distinct in the pressurized silence. Chloe heard the courier at the wall inhale through his nose and hold it. She heard the faint rattle of freezing rain against reinforced glass. She heard, with painful precision, the way Victor had framed the route to the crosswalk where the witness walked before school. Courtesy wrapped around cruelty. Administrative phrasing as camouflage. Every tactic she had seen in hospital abuse cases translated into cleaner suits and lower voices. Her fingers tightened around her pen until the plastic bent. She set it down so no one would see the tremor. The maitre d' had said no smoothing. House protocol had demanded exactness. Yet 10 minutes earlier, she had heard Matteo's security chief murmur a short, archaic Albanian term into his cuff mic when the courier arrived. A term old enough to sound out of place in modern business speech. Not a place name. Not a logistics label, a signal. She had noted it without meaning to, the way exhausted minds sometimes catch the one detail they can't afford to miss. Victor leaned forward, forearms on the table. We are waiting, Miss Park. She turned to Matteo, kept her voice level, and translated in Italian. Mr. Sava says weather may disrupt one municipal route at first light. He requests alternate gate authorization and asks that we apply Kembana e Vieter to avoid confusion. The phrase landed in the middle of the room like a dropped glass. Two men near the bar looked up at once. The security chief's eyes cut to Chloe, then to Victor, and his right hand moved to his earpiece with disciplined restraint. Matteo did not move at all, but his attention sharpened into something so focused it felt visible. For a heartbeat, Victor seemed unsure whether he had heard correctly. Then the uncertainty hardened into anger so fast, his expression barely changed. Only his jaw tightened and a pulse jumped near his left temple. He spoke in Albanian, clipped and louder now. That is not what I said. Chloe answered in the same language, steady. That is what I translated. He switched to Italian for the room, smile repaired but brittle. Your interpreter is either incompetent or insolent. No one laughed. No one reached for a glass. Matteo set his pen beside the contract folder with geometric precision. "Clarify," he said. Victor turned in his chair to include everyone. Voice smooth again, almost amused. "Gladly. I said a witness problem can be solved before dawn if your house prefers certainty over paperwork. I gave details so there would be no misunderstanding." He looked directly at Chloe. She chose to edit. The courier at the wall closed his eyes for an instant, then opened them and stared at the carpet. Chloe's skin prickled under her damp coat. She felt every face on her, every calculation adjusting. In rooms like this, neutrality was currency, and she had just spent hers in public. She could still backtrack. She could call it fatigue, migraine, misheard dialect. She could rescue her own safety by sacrificing someone else's. The option sat there, hideous and practical. Instead, she lifted her chin. "He threatened a minor," she said in Italian, each word measured. "He expected me to deliver it for approval." Victor laughed, short and incredulous. A hired mouth accusing principles of moral theater. Remarkable. The insult hit exactly where it was designed to hit. Hired mouth, tool, not person, replaceable equipment with a pulse. Chloe kept her eyes on Matteo and forced her breathing to stay even. Matteo's voice dropped lower. "Mr. Sava, did you issue a threat against a child witness in my meeting?" The room contracted around the question. Victor spread one hand, courteous. "I described risk management. Your translator, perhaps overwhelmed, embroidered." He did not look at Chloe while he said overwhelmed. He looked at the men with vintage watches, inviting shared contempt. Chloe opened her mouth to respond, but Victor moved first. He rose with sudden speed, came around the table in 3 hard steps, and seized her wrist above the cuff where the coat had already frayed. Pain shot up her forearm, bright and immediate. The chair leg scraped behind her as she half stood by reflex. "Careful," he said softly in Albanian, bending close enough that only she could hear. His breath smelled faintly of espresso and mint. "Say exactly what I told you. Backpack, crosswalk, dawn, or your statement becomes the reason she vanishes." Her throat closed so sharply she couldn't swallow. The room blurred at the edges. She could feel the shape of his fingers through wool and skin, each point of pressure turning hot. This was no longer coded speech across polished wood. This was control reduced to grip and proximity. She heard herself make a small sound, not a word. Victor straightened without releasing her and addressed Matteo in Italian, smiling again. "You see, she's tired. Let her correct the line and we can continue." Chloe stared at the table edge, at the reflection of crystal in black lacquer, at the shaking of her own hand trapped in his. Training and fear collided in her chest. Freeze sat on one side, heavy as stone. Action on the other, thin and risky and still available. She shifted her left hand to her lap and pressed the recessed button on her smartwatch twice, the emergency setting she used during volatile emergency room interpretations. The device vibrated once against her skin, confirming it had locked and buffered the previous 3 minutes of audio. She kept her face blank so no one would see. Then she spoke. First in Albanian so Victor would hear every syllable clearly. "Release me." He tightened his grip instead. "Do your job." Chloe switched to Italian, louder. "Mr. Villieri?" He repeated the threat to me directly. "Backpack, crosswalk before dawn. I am placing this on record." The chair at the head of the table moved. It was a small sound, wood against carpet. But command arrived with it. Matteo stood in one controlled motion, and the temperature of the room seemed to drop. "Take your hand off her," he said. No one else spoke. Even the rain against the windows felt farther away. Victor kept smiling, but the smile now showed strain. "You would derail a 7-figure agreement over interpreter theatrics?" Matteo did not raise his voice. "I gave you an order." Victor's fingers stayed locked on Chloe's wrist. "And I gave your employee a correction." The security chief near the bar took one step forward. 2 Valieri men at the side wall adjusted position, bodies angling to close corridors without overt movement. Across the table, an Albanian bodyguard shifted his jacket hem with his thumb, checking access to whatever sat beneath. Chloe's pulse slammed in her ears. She could not tell whether she was trembling from pain, adrenaline, or cold. She looked at Matteo and saw no visible fury, only a precision that was colder than shouting. His gaze flicked once to her trapped hand, then to Victor's cuff, then to the bodyguard's right side. "Rossi?" he said, eyes still on Victor. "Lock exits." The security chief answered immediately, "Yes, sir," and touched his mic. Doors at both ends of the salon clicked as magnetic bolts engaged. A murmur ran around the table and died. "Second," Matteo said, "separate Mr. Sava from all devices and from my staff." 2 men moved in from opposite angles. Victor released Chloe only to shove her chair backward into their path. She stumbled, caught herself on the table edge, and felt pain flare through her wrist, where his grip had marked the skin in rising purple arcs. One of Matteo's men reached toward her, but Matteo cut in without looking away from Victor. "Not her. Behind the service column, now." Chloe stepped back on unsteady legs, then forced them to move, one step and then another, toward the marble column near the bar, where sight lines narrowed. Her breath came fast and shallow. She pressed her injured wrist to her chest and tasted metal at the back of her mouth. Victor laughed again, too loud for the room. "This is how you run an enterprise now? On accusations from translation staff?" Matteo's answer came like a shut door. "No one in my house threatens women or children and leaves with leverage." For the first time, something unmasked in Victor's face. Not fear yet. Contempt stripped of polish. "Your house? You think you own the weather, the courts, the streets?" He slid one foot back, subtle, creating angle. "You think your rules reach everywhere?" Matteo gave a slight signal with 2 fingers. His men slowed, reading it, adjusting to keep distance without crowding. Chloe saw the Albanian bodyguard near the wall move his left hand toward his jacket, then stop when a Valieri guard leveled a quiet warning. Hands visible. The courier had gone white and rigid, still pressed against the paneling, document tube clutched to his chest like a shield. 3 days of sleet had taught the city to listen for impact. And another burst of freezing rain hit the windows in a hard, fast sheet, loud enough to cover one dangerous half-second of movement. Victor twisted as if to comply, then snapped his right arm down toward his ankle line, where a narrow ceramic blade had been taped inside his trouser seam. The weapon flashed pale under chandelier light as he tore it free and pivoted toward Chloe's side of the room. "Down!" someone shouted. Chloe dropped behind the column, shoulder striking marble, breath knocked out of her in a sharp gasp. Shoes pounded across carpet. Chairs tipped, crystal rattled. Matteo moved first and fastest, crossing the distance with controlled violence, voice low and barely contained, as he issued orders in clipped sequence that cut through the chaos. "Hold fire. Door team. Seal corridor. Rossi, medical to the bar alcove. Sava stays alive." The room reorganized around him in less than a second. And Chloe, crouched behind cold stone with her wrist throbbing and heart hammering, understood that the negotiation was over and the real hierarchy had just declared itself. Mateo hit Victor at the moment the blade cleared fabric, not with a wild strike, but with a hard, precise collision that drove shoulder into sternum and redirected the knife arm away from the column where Chloe crouched. Victor slammed into the edge of the bar, glassware shuddering in its rack, and Mateo's left hand clamped his wrist before the ceramic point could arc back. The sound that tore out of Victor was rage, not pain. Mateo's voice cut through it, low and flat. "Rossi." His right hand, now. Rossi was already there, locking Victor's elbow while another man kicked the fallen chair out of the path. Across the room, the Albanian bodyguard tried to step in and met two drawn sidearms aimed center mass. "Don't," one guard said. The bodyguard froze, hands rising slowly. Chloe stayed on one knee behind the marble column, breath jagged, fingers numb where they pressed against the stone. Her shoulder throbbed from impact. She could see only fragments through the gap between column and bar. Mateo's sleeve rolled half an inch at the wrist, Victor's cuff torn, the pale blade still trapped between their hands. "Drop it," Mateo said. Victor bared his teeth. "You overreacted to a misunderstanding." Mateo bent Victor's wrist another degree until the blade slipped and clattered onto the black lacquer floor. Rossi kicked it under the bar and pinned Victor's other arm behind his back in one continuous motion. "Zip ties," Mateo said. "Double bind. Search ankles, belt line, collar seams." 3 men moved at once. One went to the doors and verified the magnetic locks. Another swept the Albanian side of the table for weapons and phones. The third pulled document folders into a single stack and photographed each page before touching anything else. At 3:24 a.m., the wall clock clicked forward again while the room transformed from negotiation chamber to controlled scene containment. "Medical," Mateo called without raising volume. "Now." A woman in dark scrubs emerged from the service corridor with a compact trauma bag already open, as if she had been staged one room away. She glanced once at Mateo, waited for a nod, and then crossed directly to Chloe. "Miss Park, I'm Lena," she said, kneeling to Chloe's level. "Look at me. Can you stand?" Chloe nodded, even though her knees shook. Lena's offered a forearm brace rather than grabbing, and Chloe accepted it, rising carefully. Her wrist flared with sharp pain as soon as she put weight through her hand. Dizziness? Nausea? Migraine before this, Chloe managed. No head hit except the shoulder. "Good. We'll check both." Mateo turned his head toward them for a fraction of a second, eyes tracking Chloe's posture, then faced Victor again. "Keep him conscious. Keep him quiet." Victor laughed, breathless now. "You think this saves you?" "It saves her," Mateo said. "That's enough." He stepped back. 2 guards replaced him on restraint, forcing Victor to his knees beside the bar, wrists bound behind him, ankles cinched. Rossi held out a clear evidence pouch. The ceramic blade disappeared into it with gloved hands and a printed timestamp. Chloe let Lena guide her to the bar alcove, where a high-backed chair blocked direct sight lines. Mateo shrugged out of his suit jacket and handed it to Lena without looking away from the center of the room. For her, the wool settled over Chloe's shoulders, heavy and warm, smelling faintly of cedar and rain. Her own coat was still damp and split at the cuff where Victor had gripped her. She hated how much the warmth steadied her. Lena cut the torn sleeve seam cleanly with blunt shears, exposing the bruises rising in dark bands around Chloe's wrist. "Soft tissue injury," she murmured. "No visible break, but will immobilize until imaging." Chloe swallowed. "The recording?" Lena paused. "What recording?" Chloe lifted her left arm, showing the smartwatch. Emergency buffer. Last 3 minutes before his first grab, then continuous after trigger. Rossi was beside her before she finished. Can you unlock it? Yes. Her fingers fumbled once, then succeeded. She handed the watch over only after verifying the waveform sat intact on screen. Do not overwrite. Rossi's expression didn't change, but his tone did. Understood. Chain of custody starts now. He photographed the device in her palm, then in his gloved hand, then sealed it in an anti-static evidence sleeve labeled with time, location, and her name. Chloe watched every step until the sleeve disappeared into a hard case. Across the room, Matteo was issuing the next chain of commands to a man on speakerphone. Activate Witness Shield Protocol Delta 7. School route compromise. Pre-dawn window, female minor. I want relocation before first bell. Confirm with me, not through intermediaries. A tinny voice responded. Copy, Delta 7 initiated. Federal liaison is being patched. Matteo didn't blink. Patch now. Another click, then a new voice. This is Special Agent Hale. You have an active threat? I have a named declarant, live witnesses, and multilingual audio, Matteo said. I also have your prior request for cooperation. Send your team to Bellarosa private floor within 12 minutes. Bring child services contact cleared for immediate placement. En route. Good. He ended the call and turned to one of his lieutenants. No one leaves. Staff statements in sequence. Kitchen, service, floor security, then principals. Anyone edits language, they leave in cuffs with him. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. The courier stood near the wall now, face drained of color, both hands visible and shaking at his sides. When his eyes met Chloe's, he looked away first. Victor twisted against the restraints. You are staging theater for cameras. Matteo crouched to Victor's eye level, voice barely above a murmur and more dangerous for it. No, I'm ending your leverage. He stood again. Bring him up. The guards hauled Victor to his feet and marched him toward the center of the room. As they passed the column, Victor angled his head toward Chloe, smile cracking at the edges. This won't hold, he said in Albanian. Chloe's throat tightened, but she answered in the same language, clear enough for nearby men to hear. It already did. Rossi's mouth twitched once, almost approval, then flattened. By 3:31 a.m., uniformed city officers and 2 federal agents entered through the secured corridor after biometric clearance. Their arrival changed the room's cadence, but not its hierarchy. Matteo met them at the threshold, handed over the evidence log, and spoke in clipped legal terms with no flourish. Detainee is Victor Sava. Weapon recovered on scene. Audio evidence includes premeditated threat against a minor witness, interpreter victim, and multiple observers present. My personnel are prepared to provide sworn statements. Agent Hale, a tall woman with silver-framed glasses, scanned the room and nodded. We'll separate and interview. No one speaks to detainee without us. Matteo inclined his head once. Agreed. One of the officers moved toward Chloe with a notepad. Matteo stepped slightly into his path, not obstructing, simply setting terms. She receives medical stabilization first, he said. Then statement with counsel present if she requests. The officer looked to Agent Hale. Hale answered for him. Medical first. Matteo moved aside immediately. Lena finished wrapping Chloe's wrist in a rigid splint and checked pupil response with a pen light. You should go upstairs for monitoring. Quiet room, lower light. Chloe looked at the officers, then at Rossi. If I leave, does my statement weaken? Hale stepped closer. No. Your recording preserved the core threat. We'll take your full statement as soon as you're medically cleared. You did the right thing." The words landed strangely, almost too clean for the room they were spoken in. Chloe nodded once. Mateo gave the next order without looking away from the federal agents. "Secure elevator route to the penthouse infirmary. 2 on door, 1 inside. No one enters without my authorization or Agent Hale's." "Yes, sir." He finally turned to Chloe. "Can you walk?" She hated that her voice came out rough. "Yes." "If that changes, say it." He didn't touch her. He simply held her gaze until she nodded again, then signaled to Lena and a female guard to escort. As Chloe moved toward the service elevator, she heard Victor begin to speak rapidly in Albanian to an officer who didn't understand him. For the first time since she entered the room, she did not translate. The elevator ride was silent, except for the soft rattle of Lena's kit and the hum of cables. The mirrored walls reflected Chloe's pale face, smudged concealer, split sleeve, and the borrowed jacket hanging from her shoulders like a temporary shield from a life that had never offered shields for free. Her stomach twisted with delayed reaction. She pressed her splinted wrist to her ribs and breathed through the nausea. The penthouse infirmary looked less like a clinic than a private library that had been converted overnight. Walnut shelves, muted lamps, a treatment bed behind a frosted glass partition, cabinets of sterile supplies hidden behind panel doors. Rain tapped softly against panoramic windows 38 floors above the street. Lena settled Chloe in a reclining chair, dimmed the nearest light, and handed her water with electrolytes. Small sips. Chloe obeyed. The first swallow hurt. The second stayed down. A physician arrived within minutes, checked her wrist, shoulder, and blood pressure, ordered portable imaging, and administered migraine medication that worked slowly but steadily, turning the pain from a spike into a dull ring. Through the open doorway, Chloe heard low voices in the corridor. Shoes crossing carpet, radios clicking on encrypted channels. 3 days earlier, she would have called this world theatrical and distant. Tonight, it felt frighteningly efficient. When Mateo entered, he came alone and closed the infirmary door behind him without locking it. He had rolled his sleeves to his forearms. A faint red line marked one knuckle where Victor had struggled. Without the jacket, he seemed less armored and somehow more severe. "Agent Hale confirms the witness is in transit," he said. "Protected location before dawn." Chloe let out a breath she had been holding since the table. "Good." He remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, as if the posture restrained something harder to name. "I need your statement while details are sharp. We'll do it line by line. You can stop at any point." Now is better. Rossi entered with a recorder, legal forms, and Chloe's smartwatch and a fresh evidence sleeve marked "Transfer received back for witness review." He set everything on a side table and started the recording with date, time, and parties present. Agent Hale joined by secure video on a tablet stand, face composed, pen moving. Chloe recounted Victor's words exactly in Albanian first, then in Italian, then in English for federal transcript alignment. She gave sequence, tone, dialect indicators, and the specific phrase he used for the crosswalk timing. Twice she had to pause for breath when her throat tightened. Each time Mateo waited without interruption. When she finished, Hale asked, "Why did you use the phrase Kembana e Vjeter in your mistranslation?" Chloe looked at Mateo before answering. "I heard it earlier from security traffic. It was marked language. I needed a way to force contradiction in front of everyone." Hale's eyebrows rose. That was a calculated risk. "Yes. It may have prevented an off-record correction," Hale said quietly. The call ended after procedural confirmations and a plan for follow-up deposition. Rossi collected signatures, then left, shutting the door softly behind him. Silence settled, thick but no longer hostile. Chloe flexed her uninjured hand against the blanket over her knees and watched Matteo in the window reflection rather than directly. "Why that phrase?" she asked. "Kembana evieter." Matteo did not answer at once. When he spoke, the control in his voice was still there, but strain traced the edges. "Because my sister chose it." Chloe looked up. "She was an interpreter," he said. "Years ago, better than anyone in this city. She worked a coercion case under protection and was forced to translate a threat in a warehouse negotiation. She complied because they had a child in the next room, and she thought accuracy would buy time." His jaw tightened once. It didn't. The infirmary seemed to contract around the sentence. "I'm sorry," Chloe said, and meant it with an ache that surprised her. He nodded, accepting the words without ceremony. "After that, I changed protocol. Any interpreter in my rooms gets emergency authority language, regardless of rank. Very few know it. Fewer use it. That's why everyone reacted." "Yes." He finally sat in the chair across from her, elbows on knees, hands linked. "When you refused to carry his threat, you broke a pattern I have watched for years." Chloe studied his face in the softened light and saw what she had missed at the table. Not indifference, but effort. A man who spoke in measured units because unmeasured language had once cost him someone he could not replace. "I thought you were testing me," she admitted. "I was," he said. "Not for obedience." The answer shifted something fundamental in how the night fit together. The cold formality, the insistence on exact language, the insistence that no one smooth meaning, none of it had been performance. It had been a memorial built out of procedure. Matteo exhaled slowly, gaze dropping to the splint on her wrist. "You should never have been grabbed in my house. Your orders stopped it from becoming worse." His mouth moved then, not a practice smile for negotiation rooms, not charm. A brief, unguarded expression that looked like grief cracking open just enough to let gratitude through. It was gone in a second. "Rest," he said, voice quieter. "When imaging clears your wrist, we discuss options. On your terms." Chloe leaned back against the chair, exhaustion descending in waves now that adrenaline had nowhere left to burn. Rain traced the window in silver threads above the sleeping city, and for the first time since 2:13 a.m., the language in the room no longer felt like a weapon pointed at her throat. The quiet held for less than a minute before someone tapped twice on the infirmary door and waited. Matteo stood first, crossing the rug without sound, and when he opened it, Agent Hale was in the corridor with a tablet under one arm and two uniformed officers behind her. The fluorescent spill from the hall cut a pale rectangle across the walnut floor, bright enough to make Chloe squint. Hale kept her voice low. "Ms. Park, I need one procedural decision from you while the recording chain is still fresh." Chloe pushed herself upright in the recliner, blanket sliding to her lap. The migraine medication had dulled the sharp edge of pain, but her body still felt hollowed out, like adrenaline had burned through the center and left only shaking nerves. "What decision?" Holding asked for immediate language advisement. Sava is refusing Italian and claiming he was misheard in Albanian. Hale's expression did not change. He requested an independent interpreter. "We can call someone else, but if you do it, we lock him to your transcript and your audio. No room to backfill." Matteo's answer came before Chloe could breathe in. "No." Hale looked at him once, then back at Chloe. It's your call. Either option is defensible. No, Mateo repeated, voice calm and final. She has done enough tonight. A primary consideration had always been survival, and survival had taught Chloe to accept shelter when it was offered. Yet something in the hard certainty of his tone made her chest tighten for a different reason. She pulled Mateo's jacket closer around her shoulders and felt the weight of expensive wool over her torn blouse cuff, safety and constraint wrapped in one texture. Do I have to decide now? She asked. Hale nodded. Within 10 minutes. Counsel is waiting. By the second intake block, defense can argue delay contamination. Mateo stepped into the doorway, shoulder angled in a way that blocked half the hall. Use another interpreter. Hale's gaze sharpened. With respect, this is not your decision. The resulting tension landed directly between Chloe and Mateo. She saw his jaw set, saw him choose restraint the way other men chose aggression. He moved aside an inch, enough to concede process, not enough to concede concern. Hale said, "I'll give you privacy," and withdrew, officers following her down the corridor. When the door closed again, the room seemed smaller. Rain ticked against the glass in soft bursts. Monitors hummed from behind the frosted partition. Mateo remained by the door for a beat, then turned back to her, hands unclasped now at his sides, posture still controlled and visibly strained. "You are not going near him again tonight," he said. Chloe held his gaze. Fear and anger threaded together in her throat until both felt the same. "You don't get to decide that for me. I decide security in my house. And I decide my work." Her voice wavered once, then steadied. "If I step into that room, it will be because I choose it, not because you lock every exit and call it care." His expression did not harden. It sharpened. He put his hand on you. He threatened a child and then threatened you. My framework here is not theoretical. My framework isn't theoretical either. She lifted her splinted wrist a few inches. Bruises had darkened under the wrap, visible near her knuckles. This happened because I did my job. If I back away now, he gets to say I edited under pressure and hid. Mateo crossed to the chair opposite her and lowered himself into it, elbows on his knees again, close enough that she could see the faint abrasion on his knuckle and the exhaustion under his eyes. For the first time since she had met him, he looked like a man managing fear, not only power. "You think I am trying to silence you?" he said. "I think you're used to command." She swallowed. "I think command keeps people alive in your world. I also think command can turn into a cage if no one pushes back." His eyes stayed on her face, dark and unreadable for a long second. "And you were pushing back?" "Yes." The corner of his mouth moved. Not amusement, more recognition. "Good." The admission caught her off guard. Attraction arrived in the same instant as distrust. A non-trivial collision she could feel physically, heart beating too fast, while her shoulders remained tense as wire. He had pulled a room back from chaos in seconds. He had also told men to lock doors without asking her. Both facts were true, and neither canceled the other. He spoke more quietly. "If you choose to interpret, conditions are mine. Bullet glass between you. 2 federal agents in room. I remain visible. 1 signal from you and session ends. Do you understand me?" She almost said yes immediately, then stopped herself. "Add 1 more condition." "Name it." "No speaking for me in that room. Not to officers, not to Sava, not to anyone. You can set security. You do not answer in my place." His breathing shifted, subtle but clear. "Agreed." "Say it plainly." "I will not speak for you." The knot under her sternum eased by a fraction. She nodded once. Then I'll do it. 3 days of exhaustion seemed to settle into his shoulders all at once, then disappear behind composure. He stood and opened the door, issuing instructions in clipped sequence to Rossi and the corridor team. Secure interview suite B, federal lead only, medic on standby, visual line maintained. He did not raise his voice. Every order moved instantly. By 4:07 a.m., the storm outside had thinned from sleet to cold rain, and the private floor had been converted into a legal corridor with armed officers at both ends, evidence carts against the wall, and a temporary interview room assembled from modular glass and steel. Chloe walked between Rossi and Agent Hale, Matteo 1 step behind and to her left, close enough to intervene, far enough to honor what he had promised. Interview Suite B had 2 chambers divided by reinforced glass. Chloe sat with Hale and a court recorder at a metal table bolted to the floor. Across the partition, Victor was brought in with wrists restrained in front, his tie removed, cuff torn, smile restored like a mask reapplied in a mirror. He looked thinner without his jacket, but the predatory polish remained. He saw Chloe and leaned back. "You again," he said in Albanian. "How comforting." Chloe translated into English for the record, voice flat. He said, "You again. How comforting." Hale began advisement protocol. Chloe rendered each line precisely. Right to counsel, right to remain silent, consequences of waiver. Victor listened, then asked for clarification in rapid dialect, deliberately archaic in places, trying to outrun clean translation through speed and regional slang. Chloe matched him line for line. No smoothing, no rescue. He shifted tactics. "Tell them I never threatened a child," he said in Albanian. "Tell them she dramatized weather chatter because she wanted favor." Chloe translated exactly. Hale noted it without looking up. Victor's jaw tightened. "Tell them Valieri staged this because he needs a public enemy." She translated again, same cadence. Through the side glass, Chloe could see Matteo standing in the observation bay with Rossi and 2 agents. He did not move. Dark suit replaced by charcoal shirt, sleeves rolled, hands behind his back. His stillness made everyone else look restless. Victor followed her gaze and smiled, small and poisonous. "Ask your patron if he plans to keep you in a gilded room now. Men like him protect what they own." The words slid under Chloe's ribs with surgical precision, because they targeted exactly the fracture she was already trying to name. She inhaled once and translated every syllable into English. Hale looked up this time. Statement acknowledged. Victor leaned forward as far as restraints allowed. "Add this," he said in Albanian, softer. "A witness can vanish between legal steps. A woman with debt can be persuaded." Chloe's skin went cold. She heard the recorder's keys clicking, steady and unforgiving. She translated the line without editing, then added, in English and on record. "Interpreter notes this as an explicit coercive threat tied to financial vulnerability." Hale met her eyes and nodded once. "Noted." The door to observation opened. Matteo entered the interview chamber on Chloe's side only after Hale gave consent with a brief hand signal. He stopped behind Chloe's chair, not touching it, presence filling the room anyway. When he spoke, his voice was low and barely contained. "Mr. Sava," he said in Italian, then repeated in Albanian for precision. "You will not threaten her again. You will not threaten any child again. You will use legal language, or you will sit in silence." Victor's smile cracked. "She is useful to you now. So you posture." Matteo took 1 step closer to the glass. "Listen carefully. She is under my protection, not my possession. There is a difference you never understood, and it is why you are on that side of the wall. The line landed hard enough that even the recorder paused for half a second before resuming. Victor looked from Mateo to Chloe, searching for hesitation he could weaponize. And when his protection has conditions? Chloe turned in her chair before Mateo could answer. Her pulse hammered, but her voice held. Then I set my own. I already did. She faced Victor again and spoke in Albanian without waiting for prompt. You tried to make language carry your violence. It won't, not through me. For the first time all night, he had no immediate reply. Hale closed the advisement packet. Interview suspended pending counsel. Detainee remanded to federal hold. She signaled the officers. They entered Victor's chamber, lifted him from the chair, and guided him out. He kept his eyes on Chloe until the door shut behind him. Then he was gone into the secured corridor and layered locks. Silence settled in the suite, thinner now, no longer suffocating. Chloe became aware of every sensation at once. Ache in her wrist, medication dryness on her tongue, the chill left by wet hair at the nape of her neck. Mateo's proximity behind her like heat from a banked fire she did not trust and did not want to step away from. Hale gathered papers and gave Chloe a measured look that held professional respect and a warning about the road ahead. You did exactly what the record needed, she said. Go upstairs. Rest while we process. When she left, only Chloe and Mateo remained in the room for a breath. He moved to stand in front of her, enough distance to make departure easy if she wanted it. Your boundaries stand, he said, in this building and outside it. Evidence suggested he meant it. Her body still argued with her mind, fear and pull, refusing clean separation. She rose carefully, jacket slipping from one shoulder, and met his gaze. Then keep it as protection, not ownership, she said. He inclined his head, solemn as an oath. You have my word. She walked out beside him into the rain-muted corridor, not behind him, and this time no one tried to speak for her. The corridor smelled like rain, drying on wool and disinfectant. And Chloe had just matched her pace to Mateo's when Rossi came toward them with a hard case tucked under one arm and a printed form in his gloved hand. He stopped at a respectful distance, eyes on Chloe, not Mateo. Ms. Park, evidence status update, he said. Your smartwatch was forensically cloned at 4:41. Original remains in federal custody under your name. This is your receipt and digital hash record. The ceramic blade is logged with City Crime Lab intake. Your torn blouse cuff was photographed for injury correlation and returned with your personal effects if you want it. I want it, she said. Rossi handed over a sealed clear bag containing the frayed black fabric, a small thing that still made her stomach tighten. The document tube from the courier is also in evidence. Shipping manifests, real paper over false routing. Mateo glanced at Rossi. The room statements? Completed, except 2. Rossi's expression stayed neutral. The valet and the courier asked to speak only with federal. Agent Hale appeared at the far end of the hall before either man could say more. They already did, she said, joining them. Valet confirmed why he hesitated. His niece uses the same school crossing Sava described. He recognized the location in Albanian and panicked. Courier admitted debt coercion and said Sava ordered him to pass timing updates as weather notes. We verified with message extractions. The last hard knot in Chloe's chest loosened a fraction. The shaking tray, the avoided doorway, the courier's thumb rubbing the tube seam raw. None of it had been random. And the cufflink? Chloe asked. Hale looked at her, mildly surprised. Quartered turns were a visual signal to his bodyguard. Every 4th turn meant be ready to break the room if negotiations stalled. You caught it. At 4:58 a.m., a court clerk patched into Hale's tablet from the overnight magistrate desk. Charges were read in clipped legal cadence, while officers moved around them with quiet urgency. Aggravated assault, coercion, trafficking conspiracy, witness intimidation, weapons violation, and federal enhancements tied to threats against a minor. Hale listened, answered, then turned the tablet so Chloe could hear the final line clearly. No release. Held pending arraignment at 9:30. Chloe exhaled slowly. Mateo's gaze shifted to her face, measuring whether relief was real or just exhaustion wearing a calmer mask. "Go upstairs," he said. She shook her head. "One call first." Hale checked the time and nodded. "Make it quick." In the infirmary, dawn was still a rumor behind the clouds. Chloe sat on the edge of the recliner, splint heavy on her wrist, Mateo's jacket folded beside her, and called the numbers she had saved under patient accounts. Marisol answered on the second ring with the same efficient tone as earlier, then softened when she heard Chloe's voice. "I can process your payment intent now," Marisol said. "Do you still have 100 by morning?" "Yes," Chloe said, glancing at Hale, who was reviewing forms near the door. "And I need a hardship review reopened. I can submit legal documentation today." There was keyboard clicking, a pause, then, "I see a note from Federal Victim Services, already attached to your file. They pre-flagged you for emergency compliance assistance. If you can upload your case number before noon, reporting pauses for 30 days. Chloe blinked. "It's paused?" "Temporarily, yes." "Thank you." When the call ended, she texted her mother before she could rethink it. "I'm safe. Long night. I'll call after I sleep. Keep your $18. I'm covering rent." Her mother replied almost immediately with a single line that made Chloe press the phone to her chest for a second. "Then eat first, brave girl." By 6:12 a.m., cold daylight had started to flatten the city into wet gray plains. Hale returned with 2 folders and set them on the side table. Witness protection update. The teenage witness and guardian were moved before first bell. New district, sealed transport, no school route exposure. She opened the second folder. Compensation paperwork for emergency victim assistance. Lawful, audited, not a favor. You sign. Funds can bridge housing and medical arrears while prosecution runs. Chloe read every line. No hidden ownership language, no private debt hooks, no conditional residency terms. She signed with her left hand, slowly, because her right shook too much to make legible letters. Mateo watched without interrupting. When she finished, he placed a business card on the table. Plain stock, embossed only with a name and a compliance office address. "Separate matter," he said. "Legitimate logistics arm. We need head of language compliance. Contract role, independent counsel, authority to stop any meeting that uses coercive speech. Consider it after sleep." She looked up at him. "Why me?" "Because you acted before anyone gave you permission." The answer landed deep and steady, not flattering, just true. At 9:30 the same morning, the arraignment courtroom smelled of varnished wood and wet coats. Reporters were kept behind a line of deputies, cameras barred from the inner well, but the gallery still hummed with contained attention. Chloe sat at the interpreter station with a federal badge clipped to her blazer and her splint hidden under a dark sleeve. Mateo took the witness stand when called, oath voice low and clear. The prosecutor asked, "Mr. Valieri, did the defendant issue a threat in your meeting?" Mateo looked straight ahead, then toward the bench. "Yes." "Against whom?" "A minor witness." "Your response?" He answered without theatrical pause. "I ordered exits locked, disarmed him, and surrendered him alive with evidence. Defense counsel rose for cross and tried to paint it as private rivalry, selective translation, and panic. Chloe rendered each question and each answer with deliberate precision, never softening, never sharpening, keeping register exact as the judge watched over folded hands. Then came the question that tightened every shoulder in the room. "Mr. Valieri, why cooperate now?" Matteo's voice did not rise. It carried anyway. "No one in my house threatens women or children and walks out protected." Chloe translated the line into Albanian for the defendant's record. Victor stared at her through the side rail, expression emptied of charm. The magistrate denied bail in under 2 minutes. 3 months later, on a bright noon in early winter, Chloe sat in a glass-walled conference room above the logistics terminal with her attorney on speaker and a stack of revised contract pages spread in front of her. She had slept that night after arraignment, then shown up to every hearing, every language review, every deposition where words had to be pinned to fact before someone tried to twist them loose again. Victor had been convicted on the trafficking counts and coercion enhancements, sentenced and transferred to federal custody. The endangered witness stayed protected under a new identity protocol. The courier entered a cooperation program with debt relief oversight. The valet sent one handwritten note through Hale that said only, "My niece walks a different road now. Thank you." Chloe kept it in the same envelope as the torn cuff. Her attorney's voice crackled through the speaker. Clause 14 now confirms she reports to the Independent Compliance Board, not Operational Command. Chloe looked at Matteo across the table. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie, hands still. "Add one more line," she said. "Any interpreter in a high-risk meeting gets emergency authority language training before deployment, no exceptions." Matteo nodded once. "Add it." She signed after the amendment printed. The payment alert hit her phone before she left the building. Victim compensation disbursed. Contract retainer posted, rent cleared. Medical account moved to managed plan with interest frozen. She opened the patient portal and watched the red overdue marker turn yellow, then neutral gray. Administrative color, small and unsentimental, and it still made her throat tighten. That evening, rain tapped lightly against the penthouse windows, as if the city had traded knives for fingertips. Chloe stood near the glass, with a mug of broth warming both hands. Not hidden now, simply tired in an honest way. Matteo remained a few steps behind her, giving space the way he had promised. "Agent Hale confirmed final transfer," he said. "All evidence archived. Your watch can be released from hold next week if you want it back." "I do," she said. "I want the original, not a replacement." "You'll have it." She turned to face him. "And if I say no to a room, any room, then it is no. And if I say yes, it stays my voice." His answer came without delay. "Always." She studied him, searching for the old reflex to command over consent, and found discipline instead. Restrained, deliberate, learned the hard way, and still learning. Safety remained a practice, not a destination. She understood that now with more clarity than comfort. Chloe set the mug down, stepped closer on her own terms, and offered her uninjured hand. Matteo looked at it for a beat, then took it carefully, as if accepting both privilege and instruction. Outside, the rain kept falling over a city that did not promise mercy. Inside, the boundaries were spoken, witnessed, and kept